The first time Maggie's mother said it, I almost dropped an entire tray of deviled eggs. Not because the sentence was loud, it wasn't. Elaine Turner said it softly, with a practiced, casual smile, in the middle of a backyard birthday party while her daughter was across the lawn, pretending not to watch me talk to another woman. She looked at me, tilted her head, and said, "So, you're why she won't date anyone?" And just like that, 9 years of friendship started making a very different kind of sense. My name is Ben Lawson, I'm 34, and Maggie Turner had been my best friend since we were 25. We met at a charity trivia night in Nashville, where she accused my entire team of cheating because we knew too much about state capitals. I told her maybe she should study harder. She told me maybe I should develop a personality beyond geography. We were friends by the end of the night. That was Maggie. Quick mouth, warm heart, dangerous memory, the kind of woman who could insult you and make you feel chosen at the same time. She worked as a middle school counselor, and I ran logistics for a regional furniture company. Very different worlds, except somehow our lives kept overlapping until eventually nobody bothered asking why I was at Turner family events anymore. I just was. Thanksgiving? Ben was there. Maggie's niece's school play? Ben was there. Elaine's birthday cookout? Apparently, also Ben. People always had opinions about that. My brother once watched Maggie walk into my apartment, kick off her shoes, steal the blanket from my couch, and say, "You live like a man who thinks lamps are government surveillance." Then he asked me, "Are you two in love or just aggressively weird?" I told him to mind his business, which was easier than telling him I did not fully trust the answer myself. The truth was, Maggie had become the most stable part of my adult life, without either of us making a formal decision about it. She knew my coffee order, my mother's birthday, the way I got quiet when work got bad, and which old country songs I claimed to hate but never skipped. I knew her too. I knew she bought birthday cards 2 weeks early and forgot to mail them. I knew she cried when kids at school improved, but pretended allergies were involved. I knew she hated being called sweet, because people used that word when they didn't want to admit she was strong. I also knew she hadn't seriously dated anyone in almost 2 years. I just didn't know I was part of the reason. At least, not until Elaine said it. The party was for Maggie's father, who had turned 65 and insisted he didn't want a big thing, which in Elaine speak meant she invited 30 people and rented folding chairs. It was late summer, still hot enough that the ice in the lemonade kept giving up immediately. Kids ran through sprinklers, and someone's uncle was losing a serious argument with a grill. The whole yard smelled like charcoal, cut grass, and too many side dishes. I was by the picnic table arranging food because Elaine had pointed at me and said, "You're tall, be useful." A woman named Kelly had been helping me. She was a friend of Maggie's cousin, nice, pretty, easy to talk to in that polite, surface-level way that makes older relatives start building fantasy weddings in their heads before dessert is served. Kelly laughed at something I said. Across the yard, Maggie looked over only for a second, but I saw it. Then she looked away too fast and pretended to listen to her aunt. Elaine saw it too. Mothers are terrifying that way. She stepped beside me, took a deviled egg from the tray, and said, "Kelly seems nice." "She does," I said, giving her a careful look. "Elaine, what?" "I'm just making conversation." "You never just make conversation." She smiled, completely unbothered. "That's because conversation is more useful when it has a purpose." I should have left right there. Instead, because I am a man with poor survival instincts around Turner women, I asked, "And what's the purpose?" Elaine glanced toward Maggie, then back at me. "So, you're why she won't date anyone?" The tray shifted in my hands. I caught it before the eggs became casualties. "I'm sorry?" Elaine's smile stayed gentle, which somehow made the sentence worse. "You heard me." I looked across the lawn again. Maggie was still talking to her aunt, but her eyes flicked toward us once more. She looked irritated now. Not at me exactly. More like she knew her mother had started something and she couldn't hear enough to stop it. "I don't think that's true," I said. Elaine took another egg. "Of course you don't. Men like you never do until somebody says it in plain English." I stared at her. Men like me? Decent, loyal, and emotionally cautious to the point of public inconvenience. Before I could answer, Kelly walked back over with a stack of plates. "Need any help?" Elaine's expression changed instantly into warm hostess mode. Oh, honey, thank you. Kelly smiled at me. I think your friend's aunt wants everyone for photos. Right, I said, grateful for the interruption and annoyed by it at the same time. But Elaine wasn't done. As Kelly stepped away, Elaine leaned closer and said, still softly, "Ask yourself why my daughter looks at every woman near you like she's being asked to applaud her own replacement." Then she walked off, just left me there with deviled eggs, a plastic tablecloth, and a sentence I could not put back where it came from. A few minutes later, Maggie appeared beside me. She wore a yellow sundress and had her hair pulled back loosely with one strand falling near her cheek. She looked casual, bright, familiar, and suddenly, familiar felt dangerous. "What did my mother say to you?" she asked. "Why do you assume she said something?" "Because you look like a man who just got audited by a church lady. That is, uncomfortably close." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "Ben." Across the yard, Elaine called for everyone to gather near the patio for photos. Maggie didn't move, neither did I. And for the first time in 9 years, I looked at my best friend and wondered if everyone else had been seeing something I had trained myself not to name. The family photo situation did not help. Elaine lined everyone up near the patio with the kind of smiling authority usually reserved for air traffic control. Parents in chairs, siblings in the back, kids in front pretending not to be sticky, and cousins drifting in and out of formation like it was a military exercise designed by chaos. Maggie ended up beside me. Not unusual, that was part of the problem. For years, none of it had felt unusual. Where she stood, how easily she reached for my wrist to move me half a step to the left, the way her shoulder brushed mine while her mother adjusted people like centerpieces. "Stop looking like you're being arraigned," she muttered out of the side of her mouth. "I'm hot and confused. You always look like that in family photos. That feels insulting." It was meant to be. The photographer, Maggie's cousin with a very expensive camera and no patience, called out, "Ben, closer." "Why?" I asked. "Because there's a whole human-sized gap between you and Maggie." Before I could answer, Maggie slid half a step nearer. My brain chose that exact moment to replay her mother's sentence. "Ask yourself why my daughter looks at every woman near you like she's being asked to applaud her own replacement." I went still. Maggie noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked, quieter now. "Fine." That was a suspiciously short lie. The camera flashed before I could answer. After the photos, the party broke back into smaller pieces. Her father went back to the grill. Her aunt started telling a story nobody escaped from for 20 minutes. The kids discovered a cooler full of popsicles and turned it into social unrest. I helped carry plates inside, mostly because I needed a task. Maggie followed me into the kitchen with a stack of empty bowls. The house was cooler than the yard, quiet except for the muffled sounds of people laughing outside. She set the bowls in the sink and turned to me. "Okay," she said. "What did my mother say?" I opened a cabinet just to have something to do with my hands. "Why are you so sure it was dramatic?" "Because she's my mother, and because you've reorganized those napkins 3 times. I looked down. She was right. Maggie folded her arms. "Ben." I should have told her. Maybe not word for word, but something. Instead, I said her mother mentioned Kelly. Maggie's expression changed, just slightly. "What about her?" "That she seems nice, that's it." I made the mistake of hesitating. Her eyes narrowed. "What else?" "Nothing useful." "Which means something very useful, because you only say that when you're hiding." I leaned back against the counter. "I'm not hiding, I'm editing." "That is hiding with better branding." That almost made me smile. Almost. Then Kelly walked into the kitchen carrying a tray of lemonade glasses. "Sorry," she said. "Am I interrupting?" Maggie stepped back too quickly. "No." Kelly set the tray down and looked at me. "Hey, I was actually going to ask if you're not doing anything next week. Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" The room went completely still. Maggie didn't say anything. That was what made it worse because I knew her. I knew the difference between her relaxed silence and the silence she used when she was suddenly holding too much in her face and didn't trust herself to speak. Kelly kept smiling, unaware. I looked at her, then at Maggie, then back again, and there it was, the exact moment Elaine had warned me about. Maggie did not look jealous in a dramatic movie scene way. She looked braced, like she had prepared herself to be gracious in advance, like applause might actually be expected. "No pressure," Kelly added. I just thought it might be nice. Before I could answer, Maggie picked up the tray again and said, I should take these outside. Then she left, just like that. No smile, no joke, no insult aimed at me for sport. Just gone. Kelly turned toward the doorway, confused. Did I say something weird? No, I said, too quickly. No, you're fine. And she was. That was the trouble. She had done nothing wrong, but the air in the kitchen had shifted so fast it felt like standing in the path of a weather front. Kelly looked back at me. So, coffee? I should be honest about this. Under normal circumstances, Kelly was exactly the kind of woman I would have said yes to. Easygoing, attractive, kind, someone my friends would call a good idea. But all I could think about was Maggie leaving with a tray in her hands and that carefully neutral face that suddenly made far too much sense. That's really nice of you, I said, but I'm going to pass. Kelly studied me for a second, then smiled in a way that suggested she understood more than I wanted her to. Got it, she said. For what it's worth, I think your answer was already in the room before I asked. And then she left too. I stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, staring at the doorway like it might explain itself. Outside, I could hear Maggie laughing too brightly. That worried me more than if she had looked upset. I found her later near the side gate, collecting empty cups into a trash bag like she had appointed herself the cleanup crew for emotional reasons. I can do that, I said. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. I'm carrying garbage, Ben. Sharp is part of the uniform. I reached for the bag. She let me take it, but only after a second of resistance. Neither of us looked at the other. Then I said, Kelly asked me for coffee. I figured. I said no. That got her attention. She turned to me fast enough that a strand of hair came loose and caught against her cheek. Why? The question came out too quickly, too personally. We both heard it. So she added, I mean, why? She seems perfectly nice. She is. Then why not? I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the tension she was pretending wasn't there. At the way her fingers tightened around the edge of the trash bag. At the fact that 9 years of friendship had apparently left me stupid in some directions, and very alert in others. I don't know, I said. It was true, just not complete. Maggie held my gaze for a second longer than felt safe. Then she looked away and said, softer now, my mother needs a hobby. I gave a short laugh. That feels unrelated. It's not. Before I could answer, Elaine called from the patio. Maggie, sweetheart, come help me with the cake. Maggie closed her eyes briefly, like a woman receiving a burden from heaven. Then she looked at me one last time and said, if she said something weird, don't listen to her. And because I was suddenly tired of being careful, I asked, what if she was right? Maggie froze. Not dramatically, just enough. Then she turned toward me, her face unreadable, and asked very quietly, right about what? Maggie's question stayed between us. Right about what? The yard was loud behind her. Kids yelling, her father laughing near the grill, Elaine calling for cake with the fake innocence of a woman who had absolutely engineered half the emotional damage of the afternoon. But the side gate felt suddenly separate, quieter, like the whole party had stepped back to see what we would do. I could have lied. That would have been easier. I could have said, nothing. Forget it. Your mom was just being your mom. Maggie would have let me. Probably. She was good at letting people retreat when she was afraid the truth might hurt more than the silence. But I was starting to understand that maybe we had both been surviving on retreat for too long. She said, I'm why you don't date anyone. Maggie's face changed. Not into shock, that would have been simpler. It changed into recognition. Like she had known exactly what her mother said before I said it, and had been hoping I would be too careful to repeat it out loud. She looked toward the patio. Of course she did. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Ben? The truth would be helpful. Maggie laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Helpful for who? For both of us, maybe. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time all afternoon, I saw the hurt under the sharpness. You want the truth? She asked. Yes. The truth is, I don't know how to answer that without humiliating myself. That hit harder than I expected. I stepped closer, but she lifted one hand slightly. Not a full stop, just a warning. So I stayed where I was. Maggie, I said quietly, you're not humiliating yourself. You don't get to decide that. Fair. She looked down at the grass, then back at me. Do you know how many times people have assumed we were together? Yes. No, I mean really assumed. Not joked, not teased, assumed. Her voice stayed low, but it carried years of weight now. My coworkers, my cousins, my neighbors, parents at school events, your mother, my mother, everyone. And every time, I laugh it off, because that's what we do. I swallowed hard. She went on. And every time I laugh it off, I feel a little more ridiculous. I didn't know what to say, so I did the smartest thing available. I shut up. Maggie's eyes had gone bright, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't. Not here. Not with a birthday party 10 yards away and her mother weaponizing cake in the background. I tried dating, she said. I did. I went out with men who were perfectly nice. Men I should have liked. Men who texted back and had stable jobs and didn't say anything alarming about crypto. A small, sad smile touched her mouth. And every single time, I'd come home and want to tell you about it. Not because the date was good, but because talking to you afterward was better. That sentence landed clean through me. Maggie, no. Let me finish before I pretend I didn't say it. She took a breath. I stopped dating because it felt dishonest. Not to them. To me. I was sitting across from these men, comparing every laugh, every silence, every small kindness to someone who had already become the standard without even asking to be. The yard noise blurred behind us. I thought about every woman I had almost dated. Every time I had found a reason not to follow through. Every time a conversation had been perfectly pleasant and somehow empty because it did not feel like Maggie leaning against my kitchen counter, insulting my lamps. Maybe Elaine had not only exposed Maggie, maybe she had exposed both of us. I said, I told Kelly no. Maggie's mouth tightened. You said that already. I'm saying it again because I need you to understand why I didn't even have to think about it. She looked at me sharply. I kept going before I could lose my nerve. She was nice, pretty, easy to talk to. There was nothing wrong with her, but I held her gaze, and all I could think was that saying yes would feel like lying in front of you. Maggie went very still. That was the first time I saw hope reach her face before fear could stop it. Then she whispered, Ben, don't say things like that unless you mean them. I know. No, you don't. Her voice shook just slightly. You can survive being careful. I can't survive almost anymore. That was the sentence. Not her mother's, not Kelly's, hers. The one that finally made everything unavoidable. From the patio, Elaine called again. Cake is happening with or without you two. Maggie closed her eyes. I am going to move to a country without mothers. I almost laughed. Then I said, come with me. Her eyes opened. Where? Front porch. 2 minutes. No audience. We're at my father's birthday party and your mother is clearly running emotional warfare through dessert. That got the smallest, real smile out of her. Good point. We walked around the side of the house to the front porch, where the noise from the backyard softened into something distant. The street was quiet. Late sunlight stretched across the driveway. For a moment, it felt like being outside the life we had known just long enough to tell the truth about it. Maggie stood near the porch railing, arms folded, face turned toward the road. I stopped beside her. Then I said the thing I should have said years ago, if I had been less afraid of losing what I already had. You're not the only one. She turned her head. I held her gaze. You're not the only one who compares people. You're not the only one who goes on dates and feels like you're doing an impression of someone available. I let out a long breath. And you're not the only one who has been hiding behind the word best friend because it was safer than asking for more. Maggie's eyes filled fast this time. Ben? I don't know exactly when it changed, I said. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was always building and we just kept calling it habit. But I know this. When your mom said I was why you wouldn't date anyone, the reason it scared me is because part of me already knew I was using you the same way. Her voice came out small. Using me how? As the reason no one else felt right. She looked at me for one long second, then she laughed once through tears she was trying not to let fall. I hate that my mother is going to be unbearable about this. She already was. I know. We stood there, close but not touching, both of us carrying 9 years to the edge of something we could not joke away. Then Maggie looked at my mouth, just once, before looking back at my eyes. And from inside the house, Elaine's voice floated through the open window. Ben, if you're going to finally kiss my daughter, please do it before the candles melt. Maggie's face went completely red. I stared at the window. Then Maggie whispered, I'm going to disappear into the ocean. We're in Tennessee, I'll find one. And somehow, even with the worst possible audience nearby, I realized I didn't want to wait another year, another month, or even until after cake. I looked at Maggie and said, for the record, I had imagined this with less commentary from your mother. Maggie covered her face with both hands. I cannot believe this is my life. Really? With Elaine as your mother? She dropped her hands and gave me a look. Strong point. That made us both laugh. And maybe that was what saved the moment from becoming too fragile. Because yes, everything between us had changed in the last 10 minutes. Yes, my heart was beating like I had just stepped off a roof. Yes, Maggie was standing close enough that all the old rules between us suddenly looked paper thin. But it was still us. We could still laugh. We could still find each other inside the panic. Maggie looked toward the open window, then back at me. She's listening. Probably. My whole family is probably listening. Almost certainly. That makes this impossible. I looked at her for one long second. No, I said. It makes it imperfect. Her expression changed. That landed somewhere real. Because we had spent years waiting for a perfect version of this, hadn't we? One without family noise or bad timing or fear or consequences. One where nobody could get hurt and nothing awkward could happen afterward. That version had never come. Maybe it never does. I stepped closer. Maggie, if you don't want this right now, say so. We can go eat cake and pretend your mother didn't just violate several emotional privacy laws. A shaky smile touched her mouth. But if the only reason we're waiting is because this moment is messy, I said, then I'm done letting messy stop us. She looked at me like those words had removed the last excuse she was still trying to hold. Then she whispered, I don't want to wait. That was enough. I touched her face gently, giving her one final second to change her mind. She didn't. So, I kissed her. Not wildly. Not like a movie version of 9 years finally crashing open. It was softer than that. Warmer. More careful. The kind of kiss that felt less like starting something new and more like telling the truth about something that had already been living there for a long time. Maggie's hand came up to my wrist. Then she smiled against my mouth. I pulled back just enough to look at her. What? She's definitely watching. I glanced toward the window. The curtain moved. Barely. Maggie pointed. Mom. From inside, Elaine called. I saw nothing. I am a respectful woman. Maggie closed her eyes. She is a criminal. I laughed, and this time, Maggie did too. Real laughter. The kind that made her lean into me for half a second like her body had finally accepted that it was allowed. Then, she took my hand. Not casually, not as a joke. She laced her fingers through mine and looked down at them as if she wanted proof. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Okay as in, I'm scared, but I'm not taking it back? My chest tightened. Good, I said, because I'm scared too. That seemed to help her. We stood there on the front porch a minute longer than necessary, hand in hand, doing nothing dramatic except not letting go. Then Maggie took a breath. We should go back before she starts narrating. Too late, probably. When we walked into the backyard, everyone behaved terribly. Not cruelly, just terribly. Her cousin immediately looked at our hands and dropped a stack of paper plates. Her father squinted at us from near the grill, then said, About time, like he had been waiting since the Clinton administration. Elaine stood by the cake, radiating innocence in a way only guilty mothers can. Maggie pointed at her. You are on probation. Elaine smiled. I accept no charges without counsel. Her father lifted his beer. I'll represent her. You are all impossible, Maggie said, but she did not let go of my hand. That mattered more than any announcement could have. For the rest of the party, nothing and everything changed. We still helped with cake. We still teased each other. I still carried folding chairs back to the garage because Elaine believed height was a form of volunteerism. But now Maggie would glance at me and smile like we were sharing a secret that everyone already knew. And every time she did, I felt the shape of my life shift a little closer to what it should have been. That night, after the party ended, I walked her to her car. The driveway was quiet now. Paper lanterns moved softly in the late summer air. The house behind us glowed warm and messy with family cleanup. Maggie leaned against her driver's door and looked at me. So, she said. So. Are we doing the thing where we over-discuss this until it becomes weird? I smiled. Probably a little. Good. I like our brand. But not tonight, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. Tonight? Tonight, I said. I'm asking you on a real date. Her face softened. A real date? Yes. No family audience. No ambush commentary. No deviled eggs. That's a shame. They were good, Ben. She smiled. Yes, tomorrow. Yes. Then she stepped closer and kissed me, this time quicker than the first one. Less careful, more confident. When she pulled back, she said, there. Now my mother doesn't get credit for the second one. She'll still take it. I know. The next day, I picked her up at 6. I had known Maggie for 9 years, but standing on her porch for an actual date made me nervous in a way that felt almost ridiculous. She opened the door in a green dress, saw my face, and smiled like she had just found a new favorite thing. You're nervous, she said. I am not. I am appropriately alert. She laughed and kissed my cheek. Good. Me, too. Dinner was strange for the first 5 minutes. Then it was not. That was the best part. We had been afraid romance would make us lose the friendship. It didn't. It gave the friendship somewhere honest to go. By the time dessert came, Maggie had stolen half my tiramisu, insulted my wine pronunciation, and held my hand under the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was, because the truth was nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. After that first real date, Maggie and I made one rule. No pretending this was fragile just because it was new. That sounds simple. It wasn't. For 9 years, we had known exactly how to be close without naming it. We knew how to sit shoulder to shoulder on a couch, how to argue over music in the car, how to call each other after bad days. What we didn't know yet was how to do all of that while also letting ourselves reach for each other on purpose. So, we learned. Slowly at first. The first week, we went to dinner twice and acted like teenagers every time our hands touched. The second week, Maggie came over for movie night and fell asleep with her head on my shoulder like she had done 100 times before. Only this time, when she woke up and realized where she was, she didn't pull away or joke too fast. She just looked up at me and whispered, "This is better when I don't have to pretend it means nothing." I kissed her forehead and said, "Yeah, it really is." Elaine, of course, became unbearable. Not in a cruel way, but in a very specific Elaine way. The first Sunday dinner after Maggie and I started dating, she placed us side by side at the table, handed me the mashed potatoes and said, "Ben, sweetheart, pass these to your girlfriend." Maggie pointed her fork at her. "Say girlfriend again like that and I'm leaving." Elaine smiled, completely unfazed. "Your girlfriend seems tense, Ben." Her father laughed so hard he nearly choked on his iced tea. But underneath the teasing, there was a profound sense of relief from her family, from mine, and from our friends who had spent years watching us stand right beside the obvious and call it coincidence. 3 months in, Maggie told me the part she had been scared to say out loud. We were sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen she had mocked for years, because I owned exactly one good lamp. She was stirring a tea she didn't drink and said, "I keep waiting for you to miss the old version of us." I looked at her. The old version? The safe one? She kept her eyes on the mug. The one where if something went wrong we could still pretend we hadn't risked anything. That deserved an honest answer. I sat across from her and took her hand. I don't miss it. I'm grateful for it because it got us here, but I don't want to go back. I like knowing I can love you without pretending it's just loyalty. That was the first time I said it. Love. Not accidentally, not under pressure, and not as a joke wearing a nicer shirt. Maggie went completely still. Then her face crumpled into the happiest, most annoyed expression I had ever seen. "You cannot just say that while I'm holding hot tea," she whispered. "I can repeat it after you set the mug down." She set it down immediately. So I said it again. "I love you." She cried, then laughed, then said, "I love you too, you emotionally cautious disaster." That became us. Still teasing, still familiar, but honest now. A year later, we moved in together. Technically, Maggie moved into my place. But within 2 months, my apartment stopped looking like a man was being punished by his furniture. She brought books, lamps, framed photos, and one ceramic bowl that served no purpose except, according to her, visual peace. I complained, then I used her blankets every night. She never let me forget it. 2 years later, I proposed at the same house where Elaine had first exposed us. Not during a big party. I had learned my lesson. It was just Maggie and me on the front porch after Sunday dinner. Late summer again, the air warm, everyone else inside pretending not to spy badly. I told her I had spent years thinking the safest thing I could do was keep her exactly where she was, my best friend, my constant, my almost. Then I told her the truth. That was never safety. That was fear with good manners. And I don't want to be polite with the rest of my life. I want to be yours. Maggie stared at me, eyes already shining. Then the front window curtain moved. She turned her head and yelled, "Mom!" Elaine's voice came from inside. "I am admiring the landscaping." Maggie looked back at me, half laughing, half crying. "You planned this here?" I thought it was thematically appropriate. "You're ridiculous." "Yes. And I love you." "Yes," she laughed, real and bright, holding out her hand before I even finished opening the ring box. "Yes, Ben." Elaine took full credit at the wedding, obviously. In her toast, she said, "Some people need a little push. These high needed a full maternal investigation." Maggie buried her face in her hands. I stood up, lifted my glass and said, "In fairness, the investigation was accurate." Years later, people still ask when we knew. Maggie says she knew before I did. Elaine says she knew before both of us and has witnesses. I say I knew the day Kelly asked me for coffee, and my first instinct was not curiosity, but a strange kind of guilt, because some part of me already understood I belonged to the woman standing 10 feet away pretending she didn't care. But the truth is simpler. I think I knew slowly in grocery aisles, in late-night calls, in family photos, and in all the small, ordinary moments where Maggie had already become the person I wanted beside me before I was brave enough to ask her to stay. What would you have done if your best friend's mom looked at you and told you that you were the reason her daughter wouldn't date anyone? Have you ever had someone else see the truth between two people before they were brave enough to admit it themselves? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.